Well, hey everyone, welcome to Grace Church Online. My name is Pastor Joe. It is so good to be with you as we get our services rolling here. We're going to hang out in the virtual lobby for a little bit. If we were here in the building before church, we'd be saying hi to each other, rubbing shoulders, seeing how your week was going, and catching up a little bit. Be in the community of the church as we kind of navigate in and grab a cup of coffee, kind of see what's going on. Eventually, maybe if you got kids, getting them checked in, find your way in, grab a seat, and get ready to spend that time worshiping, engaging with God beforehand. And so we're going to kind of do that virtually, right? We're going to hang out a little bit, see what's been going on in our church, and get kind of dialed in as we head toward our services today. So again, great to be with you and would love to hear from you, right? We got our hosts that are ready and to go. They're live. They can't wait to interact with you and engage with you and answer any questions you might have or be able to respond to anything you might say. So they're always there, ready to go. And so if you're here, say hi. Let us know that you're here. It's a community experience, right? It's not just about showing up and watching or showing up and attending. It's about becoming a part of the church and even acknowledging one another. It can be a really, really neat and big part of that. So one of the things that I like to talk about during our virtual lobby experience is just some of the things that are going on amongst the life of the church. Kind of taking a look at what's been happening, what are the different ways in which people are engaging, what are some of the ways that we're able to interact with our community or even around the world. What are some of the things happening in the life of the leadership here at the church? Because those are the kind of things that help us draw in and realize all of the wonder that God is doing through his people here at Grace. And so we'll kind of get into that. I'm going to ask you guys a few questions, and I would love for you to kind of chime in, and our host will make sure to kind of pull all these together, and we'll see what we can do with them in the future. But one of the things I want to ask you is, as we take a look at kind of our virtual lobby experience, hanging out here together online, like, what would you like to know about? Maybe there's a behind the scenes question you're just really curious about. Maybe there's a leader that you would love to know. Just, you're like, I see this person on stage. I know that this is the person that's always behind the sound booth, or this person's always checking in the kids, or what's it like to be a life group leader? Like, maybe you have some of those types of questions, and you can kind of start throwing those out there, and we'll take a look at those and slowly maybe get through those over the next few weeks and try to give you guys just a wonderful picture of what it looks like to be a part of the church, maybe from any of these creative angles. Maybe we'll just tell the story. Maybe we'll be able to do an interview, and we'll bring someone on here with me, and we'll chat with them and kind of hear how life is going and what it is that they do. But go ahead and kind of chime into the chat window there and let us know. What do you have questions about? How does the church work? What does this leadership role look like? What would it look like to volunteer for this ministry? What does it really look like maybe to take a step and jump into a life group? Are they honestly expecting me to come out? All those different kinds of things. You can ask anything you want, but drop those into your chat window, and we would love to kind of, again, compile those and help you navigate that over the coming weeks. Now, this weekend, here we are kind of about a third of the way through October, which means fall stuff is in full swing, not only at the church, but in our communities. Many of us might even be thinking about Halloween and what's that going to look like this year and all that already. But this weekend, we have our Family Fall Fest. And so if you haven't kind of had that on your calendar, you're not sure whether or not you want to do that, of course, it's going to be fun and creative this year as we look at 2020. But check out those details online or on the app, and make sure you come on out for that. It's going to be a blast. It's just a way to kind of spend a part of our fall season together, to do something fun. Maybe grab some neighbors and bring them along with you. A fun way to just kind of engage and hang out. Maybe make an event out of it itself, not even just coming to church, but maybe you can grab some hot chocolate or something afterward together and build those relationships. And honestly, if you know what I mean by praying for your three, it's something that we talk about here at Grace Church a lot. We want to be praying for people in our lives that we would love to know and come to understand the hope that is in Jesus. If you're praying for your three on a regular basis, maybe invite one of them to come out with you, especially if they have kids, and maybe, again, make a little family event out of it and kind of just have a nice Sunday afternoon together. It'll be a lot of fun. Our life group is doing a fun activity here in a little bit. We all chipped in to have a kind of a collective meal together. We're going to do kind of a steam pot dinner date night. It's going to be a lot of fun. So everybody chipped in. We're going to get a bunch of seafood, get a couple of huge pots, drop it all in there. We've discovered a really good recipe for what you put in there to help steam through the food, and we're really looking forward to that. That's going to be what one of the things our life group is doing this fall. Just kind of a unique way to get together, and we're picking a day. We're praying for great weather. We'll be out on the patio. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I love those kind of events, right, where you can just really be together, enjoy some fun food on some level, and just chat and laugh and have a good time. Can't wait to do that. And then I'm going to try to save some of the remnant seafood, maybe some of the mussels and some of the shrimp, and then the broth from doing the steam pot, because my brother-in-law makes the best seafood pasta, and it's always started with kind of the leftovers of a steam pot night. So even if we have to freeze the broth or something like that for a little while, but I don't know what he does. I love to eat. I love to explore new foods, but I'm not much of a cook myself. All I know is he uses that broth as part of the base of his sauce, and then with the linguine, and it's a cream tomato sauce, and then the seafood on top of it. Va bene. So good. So good. All right. Anyway, enough about food, at least for the next couple of seconds. It is, again, good to be with you guys here in our virtual lobby. Thanks for jumping on with us online. Pastor Joe here. You might be wondering why there are some balloons behind me. There's even some streamers here on the table. Our collective ministry this week just had a really cool event as they gathered the college students together, where they basically celebrated that it was everyone's birthday all at once. And so there's actually balloons all over the lobby still. There's streamers hanging everywhere. They had a really, really cool event. They got party hats and everything. They had a great time. And so it was just a really fun way to kind of celebrate that and acknowledge that. And these are the kind of things that not only do we like to do kind of officially as a church, but I hope they spark ideas for you as you're trying to connect with the people in your life as well. You might be like, oh, I'm not in college, or I missed it. I'm in college, but I didn't realize that's what was going on. These can be great sparks, right? Just great ideas of how to do something that gathers some people together and continue to build those bridges of relationships with other folks. It's so fun. Again, that was a great event on Thursday, and so excited they could kind of celebrate everybody's birthday all at once. However, I didn't see any banners that just said "It is your birthday," and I don't see any half blown up brown and silver balloons. So if you know that reference, which you should, it is. I don't see any office themes in here. So anyway, we'll help them upgrade next year. Super fun. Well, this last week, I got to be a part of a retreat, which was great. This retreat is once a year. Let me back up one more step. So Grace Church is a part of a network, a family, a fellowship of churches that's called the Charis Fellowship. And so Charis means grace. And so all around the world, there are thousands of churches that are a part of our network. Actually, most of them are international and have been a wonderful fruit of missions efforts over more than the last century. It's been really, really cool. But we're a part of this family. And so once a year, some of the pastors from a region will get together and have a retreat and encourage each other and help each other and network a little bit, share some stories, share some wins together, and really just continue to work to fill each other up and help each other continue to move forward in ministry. So I got to do that this week. I got to go hang out at a retreat center in kind of southern Ohio, and it was great. First of all, we had beautiful weather. It was 75 degrees and sunny the whole time we were there, and so it was just great to get outside. And during one of our free time breaks, I even went and played disc golf, which I've only done twice now in my entire life, and it was fun to do that. And what's kind of neat about that, as long as you're not with someone that's super good, disc golf is kind of doesn't matter if you're bad, just grab some friends, you can go do it together. It was really, really fun. But I got to go do this retreat, and I got to go hang out with these folks, and it was just refreshing, right? So it was everything from kind of talking about the different ways that we keep pursuing Jesus ourselves as individuals, and what are the ways in which we keep trying to run after him and build that relationship up with him. We also kind of got silly. There was one night, there was about 7 of us hanging out in kind of the pool area, and we started started to get nostalgic, and we had a Bluetooth speaker, and we were playing a bunch of songs from the 90s and early 2000s that a lot of us kind of grew up with in middle school, high school, and college. And to be honest, we were just belting them, singing them super out loud, and it was just a lot of fun. And so what that actually got me thinking about was, not only was that a great time to spend with these leaders, but my wheels started turning, and maybe the same can happen for you, is, are there some people in my life that maybe I can coordinate and go do something like that with them? Maybe it's just 2 other people or up to 10 other people. I don't care what the number is, but just go spend a night and a morning or a night and an afternoon away and spend some intentional time, not just hanging out, but making sure there's elements of like, how do we build into each other? How do we help each other grow? But then also building in some intentional fun elements as well, and really just cultivate a depth of relationship together. I just think it's so important that we get past some of the easy conversation. I think Pastor Jeff talked about it a couple of weeks ago, just in terms of the nature of, if we want to have like deep and meaningful and life-changing relationships, we need to be able to talk about things that aren't just easy to talk about with a stranger. So if you can, run into someone at the grocery store, and for me, I can chat about the Browns, and they're 3-1. Here we go, Brownies. Here we go, hoo hoo. But you can chat about the Browns. You can chat about the Buckeyes, OH, right? Like you can do all that. You can chat about the weather. You can chat about COVID. But you can talk about those things with anybody, right? And yeah, maybe you can get a little bit more nuance with some of your closer friends. But I want to say those are easy topics. And so things, whether it's a retreat or maybe it's just in your life group or just an intentional relationship that you've been building where you meet together regularly, like having those opportunities to dive into real life, whether it's talking about relationships or your dating hopes and dreams, or the struggles raising your kids, or the things that you're trying to navigate with your parents, or whatever it might be, how you're growing together with Jesus. When we can get into those conversations, man, life really takes off, and it's so fun. Well, kind of transitioning there, I'm actually very curious. That's very important, of course. But, again, here we are in the middle of October. You're probably thinking a little bit about Halloween, at least a tad bit. And I'm curious, what has been your best, if not your favorite, Halloween costume that you've ever had? So go ahead and put those in the chat window. Give some people some exciting ideas. Maybe one time you dressed up as... And then somebody's going to read that and you're going to be so excited. Probably my favorite Halloween costume, if I'm being completely honest, we actually did at Christmas time. Long story, but my wife and I dressed up in hillbilly formal attire. It was so awesome. We actually made her a duct tape dress. And so it was full on duct tape all the way from her shoulders down to her calves. And then we used orange duct tape to kind of accent it with some different colors. Had a big bow on the side. I made myself a duct tape vest, and had one of those t-shirts that looks like it's a tuxedo with the sleeves cut off. It had a nice mullet wig, full. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I'll find that picture at some point again. I think I buried it to make sure there was no evidence, but I might be able to find it. Nothing ever disappears digitally, does it? But it's just, those kind of things. What was your best Halloween costume? And maybe that'll help someone come up with some ideas this year. My daughter really wants to be Moana, so we're working on that. She's excited to do that this fall, and it should be a really fun time. Many of you guys know I've been working on a tree house, what is now all summer long, or a playhouse, I should say, in my backyard, and I'm painting it now, which is wonderful. That means almost all the construction's done. But I never thought in this entire project about how many hours I would be spending painting and painting and painting and painting. I'm hoping I can get the whole thing painted before wintertime. I cannot believe how many hours I have into painting this thing already, and I'm not even sure I'm halfway done. But that'll be really, really cool. But yep, here we are in the virtual lobby, and we get to hang out together. We get to talk about those kind of personal things together. We get to hang out and share about how we're trying to grow in our relationships with Christ together. And of course, we can always help you do that, even right here, whether it's in in-person stuff or virtual stuff, you can always talk with your host. They can get you the links. They can make sure that you're connected to some of the leadership of the church. They can help you take some of those steps. And we want to make sure that we can continue to be the life of the church outside of even the weekend services, to watch our faith and our relationship with God continue to grow, continue to be vibrant, even outside of a great weekend together. So speaking of our great weekend together, we're about to get started. Can't wait to worship with you and hang out. Well, now that our service has officially started, welcome to Grace Church Online. My name is Joe, the pastor of Give It Away here at Grace Church, and excited to help get things kicked off for you. If you have been a part of Grace Church for a while, you know the drill, and it's exciting to get ready to kind of dive in and focus on what Christ has for you this morning as you continue to pursue Him and build that relationship with Him. But if you're our guest, I also want to make sure that you have some things at your fingertips that can be very helpful. One thing is our app. And so go ahead and download that or open it up and start to look through there. You'll see lots of ways to engage the life of the church. You'll see lots of resources on ways to know it, live it, and give it away. That's our motto here at Grace Church, that we want to engage the story of Christ in a full way. And so you'll see learning opportunities. You'll see opportunities to connect and build relationships with others. And of course, you'll also see opportunities to serve and make impacts amongst the people of our church and in our community and around the world. And so if any of those things seem interesting or helpful for you, by all means, click on them, sign up for them, and we will help you begin to take those steps together. We kicked off a discovery group last week, so make sure you check out those whenever they pop up. That's always your best next step. You'll also see a connection card, not only in our app, but also there on our websites. You can also send direct messages to us. But through those functionalities, we would love to hear from you. If you have anything you'd like prayer about, if there's questions, maybe you want to set up an in-person or virtual meeting with a leader and talk through some things or get some help, make sure you reach out to us. We'd love to get back to you this week and help you take whatever steps you need. And then, of course, there's a way to be a part of the giving family here at Grace as well. So you can navigate that by going to our app, of course. You can also text this number here on the screen. You can find that through our website. But being a part of the giving family here at Grace is something that we can do to model the generosity of Christ, to model the heart of God as He gives, as He provides. Then we then get to continue to help the ministries of the church move forward, to serve and impact the families here that are a part of Grace Church, but also impact our communities, as well as, of course, around the world too. And so if you'd like to be a part of that, go ahead and jump on in. If you're our guest, you don't have to worry about that right away. We'd love for you to know us and trust us first, but it's a great way to be a part of what Grace Church is doing. Pastor Todd is going to wrap up our series today, regardless of circumstances, by helping us understand what it looks like to have joy regardless of circumstance. It's going to be fun. Can't wait to hear from him. And of course, we're going to have just a wonderful morning diving into some music, some opportunity to worship and focus in on Christ. It's going to be a great morning. Thanks for being with us. We'll be right back here to wrap up afterward.
Hey everyone, I am so excited to let you know about Game Day. If you're unfamiliar with what Game Day is, it is a basketball and cheerleading league for boys and girls ages 5 through 6th grade. And probably one of the things that I love most about Game Day is it is very much a community league. We have over 120 elementary schools that are represented in Game Day. About half of all of our child athletes don't have Grace Church as their home. Many of them don't even have a church home at all. And so this is actually the very first time that many of these kids and families are introduced to the love of God and the story of Jesus. And so the need for programs like Game Day has never been greater. And so we are excited to once again be offering Game Day to our community. Now, as you can imagine, there are several changes that we are going to be implementing this year. I just want to let you know about one of them, and that is that Game Day is going to 2 seasons. And so the first season is for kindergarten through 2nd grade, and that will be over the months of December and January. And then our second season is for 3rd through 6th graders, and that will be the months of February and March. Both of those seasons will have at least 2 different age divisions, and that will allow us to space people out and space things out and run a safe and clean and distanced environment for game day. Registration for game day is just around the corner. October 16th, we will have our early bird registration, and we'd highly encourage you to sign up right away. Space is limited, and we want you to invite a friend. So if you have a friend at school or maybe a family in your neighborhood that you know that could benefit from the program of game day, please invite them out. And we also want to let you know that we are in need of volunteers. It takes about 250 volunteers to operate the program of game day. And so if you could consider coaching or maybe refereeing or any other volunteer position, we'd love for you to do that. So if you have any questions, or if you want to sign up for game day, or if you'd like to volunteer, go out to gameday.org. Thanks, guys.
You can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight on my knees, my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet. I sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
Well, welcome to Grace, everyone. It's good to be with you. Thanks for inviting me in to be a part of your day as we've been in a conversation that we've been having called Regardless of Circumstance. My name's Todd. I'm the pastor of student ministries here at the Bath campus, and I'm so grateful to be able to have this conversation with you. Throughout this series, what we've been doing is we've been kind of taking a look at how we can provide some guidance and direction in the midst of a time where we're not getting it from the world. Right? Where we can look and have just bold, frank conversations about how we respond and interact with what's going on around us here in our lives. And so over the course of this series, what we've been doing is we've been looking at really kind of how God can work in and throughout us. Pastor Jeff shared a couple weeks ago that we have the opportunity in the midst of dark times to bring bright light, to be able to allow the Lord to kind of work in and throughout us. We've been taking a look at how we've been refined by the fire, embracing the fact that God is leading us somewhere amazing, right, in the midst of our circumstances. Last week, we talked about how where we were brought into this world, right? We can be light, we can be ambassadors for Christ, we can provide hope. And so I think it's important, if you are just tuning into this conversation, encourage you to kind of go back, catch up on the series. If this is your first week of this series, go back, and I encourage you to bookmark it, because I think this is a great conversation to kind of refer back to, use it as a resource. Because the reality is we're going to continue to face circumstances. We're going to continue to face crisis in our lives. It's not a matter of if crisis happens. It's a matter of when crisis happens. And we're not going to be defined by the crisis. We're going to be defined by Christ. And so today's conversation, I'm excited about it because I think it really brings our conversation to a close. But what I want us to talk about is how we can develop a response in the midst of our circumstance. I think there is a level of responsibility that we have to kind of acquire a response in the midst of the circumstance or the crisis that we might be facing. So let's do this. Why don't we turn to James chapter 1, Book of James chapter 1. James, being the half-brother of Jesus, shares with us in James chapter 1. Here's what he says. To the 12 tribes scattered among the nations, he says, greetings. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. So as we take a look at James chapter 1, he says, consider it pure joy. Consider pure joy whenever you face trials. Now let's think about that for a second. Consider it pure joy. In the midst of what life throws our way, in the midst of crisis, how is it that we can consider joy? I think we have to start by understanding what it means to consider, but also what joy is. As you think about to consider something, you're thinking about it, right? But it's not just a thought process. I think also we're drawing near to something. So when you consider joy, we're thinking of joy, but we're also, right, drawing near to it. As we think about joy, I think it's very important that we define joy, because I think for a lot of us, we'll build a variety of different definitions of the word, because I think it shows up differently in each one of our lives. And so as we think about joy, there's 3 different types of joy that I think exist. The first one is this. I think there's an emotional joy, all right, an emotional joy. And it's solely based on how we feel. So you think about this, you feel a sense of relief when you experience or you overcome a stress, right? Or stressor in your life. You experience the sense of relief. You would say that you're experiencing happiness, right? Well, this happiness, it's an emotion. It's gonna come and go. And so we have this emotional joy that we would experience. The second type of joy is what we call circumstantial. And a circumstantial joy is one that happens around us, right? So here's an example. Maybe it's yourself or someone who's dear to you. There's maybe a turn in your health. Maybe you lose a job, or there's conflict with a roommate or a friend. In these moments, circumstantial joy comes when we say to ourselves, if I can only get through this circumstance, then I would be able to experience joy. Well, now here's the thing with emotional and circumstantial joy. If we run after these two things, we can say that we're pursuing what we would call happiness, right? Well, this happiness is like a roller coaster in life, because what happens is it's going to come and go. It's an emotion. But I think there is a third type of joy that has nothing to do with emotions and has nothing to do with circumstances. And what it is, it's a spiritual joy. It's a joy that is not based on temporal things, right? It doesn't come from the things of the world. In fact, right, it's a joy that is only found in Christ alone. It's a reality that really surpasses all understanding. When we lock into who Christ is, what it does, it even provides a peace that abides in our heart no matter what. And it allows us to think to ourselves that it's like when Jesus is at the very center of what's going on in our circumstances, we know in a sense all is well. He's in the midst of the outcome. And so as I think about joy and as I see it showing up as emotional, circumstantial, spiritual, right? Spiritual being different than the other two. I develop kind of this like working definition of joy. I think joy is having an assurance that God is leading us somewhere in the midst of our circumstances and choosing to praise Him in every situation. Contentment, confidence, hope, they actually become a product, right? They become evident when we know that God is in control. And so as we think about joy, I think it's important for us to consider joy in the midst of our circumstances. How? How is that possible, right? Each one of us bring a different circumstance to the table. How is it that we can consider joy in the midst of the crisis or in the midst of what we're experiencing? Now, I want to make sure we understand that happiness and joy are different things. Happiness is good. Happiness is an emotion. There's nothing wrong with happiness. It's a good thing. But I want us to see that joy is much greater. Joy is deeper. So how do we experience that joy when we lose our jobs? When we take the financial cut, right? When we can't handle the confrontation or the conflict with our roommate, what do? How can we consider it joy? I'll be honest, this is a concept for me that I personally wrestled with. There was a period of my life about 10 years ago that I felt like it was crisis after crisis that was taking place. And I was really challenged by this idea of considering it joy. Backstory, back when I was young, when I was in middle school, my parents split. My dad was an alcoholic and he really wrestled with it. And my mom, being in middle school, I didn't understand this, but my mom just had enough. And so her and I moved out. And I remember leaving that day, saying goodbye to my dad, and not knowing that that was going to really be the last time that I would see my dad, right, for the remainder of his life. And it was that moment, not then, but now, realizing what a void that created in my life. Not having that father figure, not having the example of what it means to be a man in my life created this huge void. Well, in the midst of that, I found that my grandfather actually stepped in and really took the place of that leader in my life. He allowed me to see what it looks like to be a Christ follower, what it looks like to be a man, and he was really known for loving God and loving people well. I had started here about over 10 years ago, and I was on staff here at Grace for about 7 or 8 months. It was Mother's Day weekend, and I received a phone call out of the blue that my grandfather had passed away. And I remember getting off the phone after I heard that news and just collapsing, right? This was a man who was very dear to me, a true example in my life, and hearing that he wasn't with us anymore was devastating. And I'll tell you, my grandfather, he was still teaching high school biology. He was on his 50th year of teaching, goes home, he's mowing the lawn, and he has a heart attack. Out of the blue, unexpected, for the most part, as healthy as could be. One day he's with us, and the next day he's not. And I remember thinking to myself in that moment and just feeling like the world was starting to crumble around me. I was becoming overwhelmed with the emotion, the pain, the heartache, and really dealing with this hard situation. As we were going about just with the funeral and all of the planning, we kind of got through that season. I was really still wrestling with him not being a part of my life. And I received a phone call from my mom about a month later. And my mom shared that she wasn't feeling well. And so I was here in Ohio. My mom was back in central Pennsylvania. So I drove back to kind of care for her, to be with her, and to spend time with her. And we were going to the doctors to get some of the results of the tests that she had done the week prior. And I remember sitting in the doctor's room and the doctor coming in and hearing the word that no one wants to hear. My mom being told that she has cancer. And in that very moment, she hears that it's terminal and that it's stage 4 and that she was given 6 weeks to live from that moment. And I remember sitting in the chair next to her as she was sitting on the bed, thinking that the room was just starting to collapse in. I was just becoming so overwhelmed in the moment. The pain, and I'll be honest, the anger that started to come into my mind. Why was this happening? In the midst of this circumstance, in the midst of this trial, how am I supposed to consider it joy when we're in the midst of all of this? I'll be honest, wrestling with that idea of joy was hard for me, right? But I want to clarify something, right? Emotions are good, right? Emotions are normal. It's a part of who we are. And so experiencing pain, going through the grief process, that's all fine. It's all good. But what I want us to see is that there's something greater that can be obtained. How can we consider it joy? What does it mean to consider joy even in the midst of the worst moments, the most challenging things that we face? When our life flips upside down, when the weight of life begins to push us down a little bit in the midst of those circumstances, how do we consider it joy? What James is saying in James chapter 1, he's saying, listen, consider it joy. Why? Because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Right? The idea of like pushing through, the testing of your relationship with the Lord at times makes it stronger. It allows you to see that you have the strength to push through these circumstances when we rely on Christ. And so James is saying, listen, consider it a joy because the Lord is actually very much at work in the midst of this circumstance and in the midst of your situation. As I think about this and as I was studying, I can't help but think of Paul, an example through the New Testament. Paul is a guy who we can credit the majority of the New Testament for, the writings that he provides us. But Paul, I think, is a great example of one who actually demonstrated what it means to consider it a joy. So if you know anything about Paul, we know that personally he experienced an incredible life change. He was a man who was persecuting followers of Christ for following Jesus, right? He was the one who was bringing persecution amongst them. He experienced life change. He experienced a change of heart and started to pursue Jesus for himself. Well, Paul became someone who ended up experiencing the very persecution that he was doing to other believers, he was experiencing for himself. And so one of my favorite books in the Bible is the Book of Philippians. And Paul writes this letter to the church in Philippi to encourage the believers of the church there, to really kind of bring encouragement and life into them. Because here in this moment, if you look at chapter 1, Paul kind of talks about what he's experiencing. And he's writing this letter from prison. He actually says in verse 14 that he is in chains for Christ. And he's saying that to provide courage to the believers to continue to pursue Jesus, to continue to run after him, be strong in that. As we look through chapter 1 there of the book of Philippians, we see kind of a theme that's beginning to take place. He says that he rejoices, right? Knowing where he's at and what's happening. He rejoices knowing that God is at work in and through him. Chapter 1, verse 21, Paul even says that to live is Christ and to die is gain. Because Paul's mind in this moment is locked in on who Christ is, and he's focusing on what is to come. And so throughout the book of Philippians, we kind of get the groundwork laid there in chapter 1, but we see a common theme throughout the entire chapter. We actually see that there is a theme of joy. And I think it's a great example for us to kind of grasp and get our minds around a little bit. But what I love is the instructions that Paul gives to the Philippians. And it's something that I think really applies to us today. Take a look at Philippians chapter 4, verse 4. Here's what it says. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always. And when we do that, we see that the peace of God is something that will transcend all understanding, right? Will guard our hearts and our minds. And so I think what Paul is doing here is he's providing this incredible example of joy. And as we see this, right, I think it's safe to say that when a desperate circumstance occurs, when crisis hits, choosing to consider all things that are joy leads us to life change. It leads us to a different perspective, a different mindset. And as Paul is kind of laying out this example for us, he's allowing us to see that I'm not going to let the circumstances control me. I want the work of the Lord to continue to come through my life. I want to be used by him. So I'm not going to allow the fact that I've experienced persecution to slow me down. I'm going to consider it joy in the situation that I'm in so that I can continue to be used by him. And so instead of allowing the circumstances to get the best of him, instead he chooses a posture of joy, a posture of considering joy in the midst of all of it, so that God can use him, so that he can continue to advance the truth of the gospel. And so as we think about this in our lives, right? As we think about when the disruptions happen, when the crisis hits, you think about times where we lose our job, right? Or the time where we take the financial hit, or the consequences from a fallen out relationship or a breakup, right? These things tend to really weigh us down. The weight of the situations can get the best of us. But when we choose joy, what it does is it tips the scale. It allows us to experience and view the situations that we're in differently. But we need to know that this joy, there's a source that it comes from. And that source is Christ and Christ alone. Take a look at Hebrews chapter 12 here. Verses 2 and 3, he says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. He sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinner, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Jesus nurtured a kind of joy that is obtained when we consider the one who endured such opposition. When we think about what Jesus did on the cross, he's saying for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. He is the true source of our ability to experience joy in our lives. When we think about what he did for us, he knew his purpose, and his purpose here on earth required his life. And that exact kind of giving of his life is what provides us the opportunity to really consider and experience what it means to find joy. He tipped the scale for us. And as we consider, yes, we are to think about joy, but we are also to think about how joy shows up in the midst of the circumstance and how we can draw near to it in those moments. Guys, as I was thinking about this and preparing, I felt like it was important to kind of illustrate this a little bit. And so we were talking about how does it look for us in our lives to, find joy in the midst of the circumstance rather than letting the weight get the best of us. I can't help but think of popping a bag of popcorn, right? So bear with me here. Think about this for a second, all right? How many of you have ever popped a bag of popcorn at home? Let's be honest, it's essential for a home movie. Who knows, you might actually be eating popcorn right now while you are watching this service, and well done, that is awesome. But let's be honest, every one of us, I guarantee it, at one point has burnt a bag of popcorn before, right? I'm sure at home you have the microwave that has the popcorn button. That doesn't always work. I have still burnt popcorn by pushing that button before. In fact, I remember in college, about once a month, about 2 to 3 a.m., the fire alarm goes off because someone decided to pop a bag of popcorn, and now we're standing outside in 20-degree weather until the fire department gives us the okay to go back in. So we understand what it means to burn popcorn, but let's think about this a second, all right? Because I think there's two types of people when we burn a bag of popcorn, how we react, all right? For some of us, the microwave goes off, the popcorn is burnt. We don't even attempt to open the bag, right? We take the bag and we throw it right in the trash. We don't even give it a chance. For some of us, though, we'll open the bag and we'll pour it into the bowl because we know that even in a burnt bag of popcorn, there are still good pieces. Not every piece is burnt. And I think this gives us a good perspective. It gives us a good illustration as we think about joy in the midst of our circumstances, right? I don't think it's worth just throwing out the bag. I think it's important to open it up, to be able to experience the goodness that still exists. Because what happens is when we focus on the burnt pieces, it prevents us from being able to experience the goodness of the bag. We're not capable of getting in here and seeing that some of it is actually good. And I think the same thing goes for our circumstances in life, right? When the circumstances get the best of us and we focus on what's happening in the situation, we lose sight that there is still goodness that God is wanting to do in and throughout us in that moment. But think about the flip side of this, right? When we consider it joy, what that is it allows us to come in here and see there's good pieces. There's goodness in this bag. And when we focus our minds and consider it joy, we get a change of kind of our minds here. And the Lord allows us to see that there is still good that can happen in the midst of our trials, in the midst of our crisis. God is still very much at work. Now, I think it's important, though, to not get confused that emotions are still okay, right? Because we'd be foolish to say in every circumstance, it's joyful. I can firsthand tell you that's not true. But it's not an emotion, right? It's a mindset of considering what God is doing in the midst of the very middle of our situation. And I think for some of us, we will even go so far to say that joy becomes a mask. Joy will be the very thing that we will cover how we're really doing, how we're really feeling, and we'll just give the impression that all is well, right? Life is just hunky-dory, it's all good. But really, underneath, we're crumbling. It would be like picking out the burnt piece and smothering it in butter and salt just to be able to eat it. But it's still a very burnt piece of popcorn. And so we want to be careful to not allow joy to just be this mask as well. As we consider joy, and as I think about what I experienced even as I was caring for my mom to the very end of her life, she actually provided me an example of what it means to consider this joy. She gave me a living example of Jesus while she was here. Because here I am, as the diagnosis was given, as we're told that she has just a little bit of time left. It's amazing how quickly I was thinking about how it was affecting me. And that very moment, my mom, she cried. To think about if we were in her shoes, I would definitely do the same. But her mind shifted. She started to develop a different perspective. In the time that she had left here on earth, she drew close to Christ. She drew near to him. She considered the joy in the midst of her circumstance. And she made the most of her time. What happened is she actually considered Christ himself in the midst of her cancer. She turned to him and allowed others to see that, yes, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm experiencing in life, but listen, there's something greater. There is something later in this life that I get to look forward to, and that's eternity with him. So the prognosis was 6 weeks, but God blessed us with 16 months together. And in those 16 months of caring for my mom, this is what I saw. I saw Christ literally not only consume her, but literally come out of how she interacted with the nurses, with the doctors, with her friends. You saw a sense of peace. You saw the joy that was within her. You allowed her to see that Christ was very much at work in and through her. She got to experience the goodness of Jesus Christ. She didn't allow her circumstance to get the best of her. And for me, that set an example. It allowed me to see that, listen, I'm going to be broken. I'm experiencing the pain. I had to grieve. I saw counseling to try to get through this, right? But it was a season. But God was still very much at work in those moments. And she provided me this living example of how we can consider it joy in the midst of our circumstances. She developed a posture of joy. And I think that's important for us to grasp. Whether it's the good times or the bad, are we developing this posture of joy? Like James is encouraging us, consider it pure joy in the midst of our trials. So I encourage you today, what would it look like for you to begin shifting the thought process a little bit? To consider, to draw near to joy in these circumstances. I think joy is directly attached to our faith in Christ. And I think it's important, like what the passage in Hebrews said, that we need to lock into who he is. Right? The pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. Lock into who Jesus is in our lives. Allow him to be the center of who we are. And through him, it allows us to experience this joy. So the truth of who Jesus is and what he's done for you, does that reside in your heart? I think that's where we need to start. And so I encourage you to be thinking about that. And the last thing that I leave you with that I want you to be thinking about this week is, do you believe that God is leading you somewhere? Do you believe that he is at work in your life? Even in the desperate times, do you believe that he's leading you somewhere? I encourage you this week, as the circumstances hit, as the trials come before us, remember that we are not identified by our crisis, we are identified by Christ. And so I encourage you to consider it joy that the Lord is at work in your life and he's leading you somewhere today. Jesus, thank you. Thank you for the truth that we can point our lives back to you. We can be rooted in the exact joy that you found before you endured the cross, that we can experience that in our lives as well. Jesus, I pray that we can consider it joy. Doesn't mean that life gets easier, but we can think about and draw near the joy in the midst of our trials because you're at work. That you have a plan and a purpose for each of us. And so allow us to experience that joy so that we can continue to move forward. To use maybe the stories that are provided to us by what we've experienced, to allow it to be an example to reach others for who you are. Lord, would you be with us? We pray this in your name. Amen.
I've carried a burden for too long on my own. I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. I see it now, I'm laying it down. I know that I need before my first breath, running into your arms is running to life from death. I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out. Just as I am, you pull me in. I know I need you now. I run to the Father, fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, the reason to wait. My
Man, I love that song. I love how it always reminds us the ways in which we can depend upon God, the way in which he continues to build us up as we build that relationship with him. It's so good. And it's so helpful when we try to do things like try to find the joy in the middle of crazy circumstances. And so kind of whatever you're going through, whatever your circumstances might be, like it's just so refreshing to think about those things that Pastor Ty was walking us through and just say, you know what? Joy is possible. It's possible to kind of rise above the things that are happening in our life and have the mindset that Christ brings to the table. I love that, and I need that, and I think probably most of us do. I always want to give you an opportunity to kind of be able to respond to what God is doing in your life. And if there's a question about what you experienced today, if there's something that we can help you navigate, if you want to know more about what it looks like to have a relationship with Christ, I want to encourage you to right now reach out to your service host right there in the chat window. You can set up a texting conversation with them right now, or set up a video chat, or even set up a time in person to begin chatting through what does that relationship look like? How can we begin to take those steps together? Or maybe just finding that joy just seems so impossible for you. You need to kind of really chew on that with someone and kind of figure out what that looks like. But however we can help you, make sure you fill out that connection card, reach out to us through direct messages or right there with our host, and we'll get you squared away and we can walk this journey with Jesus together. Next week, we're excited to kick off a new series. I can't wait to be back for that. And of course, throughout the entire week, engage us through social media, follow us, subscribe, all those wonderful things. You'll see lots of resources and ways to keep our minds and hearts together on Jesus. And can't wait to do that. See you next week. Love you guys.